Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. Today is Friday, April 9th, 2021. This is our 53rd episode. We're glad to have you with us. Today, we're going to have a nice day with just us chickens. We're going to, first of all, do the COVID news. Of course, COVID is spiking in Michigan. Then we're going to talk about FDA's new change to their decontamination regulations for respirators. This marks a relatively dramatic change. And something that we knew would come one day, and it's come recently. After that, we're going to dive into some CDRH news from the Division of Consumer Education with FDA. And after that, we'll leave time for Q&A, so we're looking forward to it. But first up, I want to share with you the COVID metrics and vaccine distribution. And we've thrown a little data in here from the New York Times as well. But as I'm sure you've heard, the state of Michigan is lighting up very bright here on the national map. This from the New York Times. This is cases in the last week per 100,000 people. And it is kind of strange. Everyone's wondering why Michigan is doing this. Theories abound. But it is interesting. We were looking internally here at the following map, also from the New York Times. And this is the share of the population with a reported case, cumulative. In other words, who's had COVID. And you can see in many of the middle states, it's as high as 1 in 8 people have had a reported case of COVID. As you get to Michigan and as you get out to the east and the west coast, that number goes down dramatically. And so one of the things we're starting to wonder, as I think many are, is with the great effort that was put forward in states like Michigan to prevent the spread, are there now just a lot of people left who haven't gotten the disease and now it's spreading relatively freely? At least the last part of that, we can be pretty sure that it is spreading pretty freely. This is community transmission level by county in the state of Michigan, much, much higher than other states that you see, like Wisconsin, nearby there, Indiana also lower, but coming up from previous weeks. So it remains to be seen if Ohio and Indiana will come up in the same way. Here's some more of the detailed data, new cases, testing coming up. Thankfully, deaths are staying down, but we have heard news out of University of Michigan Health System that they are postponing surgeries once again because of rising COVID case numbers in the health system. You can see those new admissions rising up here on this graph that we've shown you the last few weeks. And the large number of people in the 40 to 69 year demographic that have come up every bit as high as they were in the middle of last winter, even though the 70 plus demographic hasn't come up at that same rate. So continuing to sort of explode there, turning our attention to vaccines for just a moment. The national picture looking increasingly good, with the exception of Alabama. Most of the states are in the 25 and up percent of the population having received 1 or more vaccine doses. We continue to see what may as well be a straight line coming up. We're now above 2.5 million daily doses administered across the U.S. So good news there, but really interesting. What does it mean in terms of the state of Michigan? What's going to happen in states like Oregon and in the Northeast, where it really hasn't saturated the population? Will the vaccinations beat sort of naturally acquired herd immunity? And are we really seeing any indication of herd immunity in the Plains states, or is it really just that it hasn't hit there again for a spring wave? All yet to be seen. That's the COVID news and the vaccine news. I do want to mention again that Into Being continues to interview for a microcontroller firmware programmer, an embedded systems developer. If you know somebody who has multidisciplinary experience, we are starting interviews next week for that, and we've got some folks lined up, but there's still room for more to talk to. We'd love for you to pass that news along for us. I also want to remind you that the A2 Biosocial is coming up on April 13th. This from MishBio and organized by Matthew Himes. He was with us on the show last month to talk about this. But coming up next week on the 13th, 5 to 7 p.m., They have a really cool platform that lets you walk around and talk to people in different rooms. It's really fun. I was part of that last month, and we'd encourage you to reach out to your local community through the A2 Biosocial. There is an RSVP. I would encourage you to go there and RSVP for the event. You can find that at mishbio.org. And another reminder about our pitch party. We're now doing it quarterly. That'll be at the end of June. And it's a pitch party for $2,500. We're starting to receive applications for that pitch party. Our judges are all on board with this change. We used to do it monthly, but we're going to do it quarterly. We're going to try to bring our judges on at the end of each month anyways to do a little bit of education about what they're looking for, the kinds of things that are of interest to them. But here are the requirements. The MedTech Crossroads pitch party. If you're a US-based MedTech startup, you're eligible for consideration, regardless of your stage. Each startup gets 10 minutes at the end of a show, and near the end of the quarter, our community judges will discuss the month's candidates before educating us on their thought process. And then they'll tip their hats to one, now for a prize of $2,500. Send those pitch decks and interest to pitchparty@medtechcrossroads.org to be eligible for consideration. And we'll have 5 to 10 startups in the couple months leading up to that. The areas that should be covered, make sure they've got this in the pitch deck. Problem statement, vision, value proposition, team, milestones, business model, competitors, and their ask, or areas that are functionally equivalent. We want to make sure that those are all in there for consideration. And we're starting to get some good candidates for that, so we'll look forward to that at the end of June. All right, let's go into FDA land. We're going to keep the slides up here, and we're going to go into the world of FDA. We want to do a deep dive on some FDA education. It's been a while since we've sat down and really updated you on what's going on with the FDA. What materials are they putting out? What initiatives do they have? And so today we're going to dedicate the rest of the show to that. And so the source for all of the following is fda.gov. There's really not much else that's going to pop up here except things directly from the agency, so don't take any of the FDA branding to mean that it's from us. It's directly from the agency. We're just going to talk through it and point you to some really cool stuff that the agency is doing these days. And before we get to some of the more mundane aspects of that, this news just recently, today, April 9th, FDA recommends transition from the use of decontaminated disposable respirators. And this is a letter to healthcare personnel and facilities. Wow, if you think back all the way to last year, a full year ago, one of the first times we heard the word EUA, or Emergency Use Authorization, was with respect to the Battelle decontamination system, where Battelle Memorial had found a way to decontaminate using vaporized hydrogen peroxide N95 respirators. And back in the day, we said, someday the day is going to come when these EUAs are no longer going to be allowed. Well, that particular day isn't quite here yet, but we're getting a lot closer. Here's what FDA says. FDA and CDC believe there is adequate supply of respirators, as of today, to transition away from use of decontamination and bioburden reduction systems. Now, that doesn't mean that they're killing the emergency use authorizations. Not quite yet. But what does it mean? Here's what they want healthcare personnel and facilities to do. Limit decontamination of disposable respirators. So in other words, we don't want you using that decontamination system if you can help it. Decontaminated respirators are still permissible, but only if there are insufficient supplies. In other words, we think there are starting to be sufficient supplies. Transition away from a crisis capacity strategy for N95s and other filtered respirators. And work on increasing your inventory of available NIOSH-approved respirators. So this has really always been the strategy, but now, as of today, April 9th, FDA is coming out and saying, we think that time is here. It's time to start moving away from the decontamination strategy and towards just an acquisition strategy. This is still good news for manufacturers of personal protective equipment, filtration equipment. Because what FDA is actually saying is stop cleaning the stuff. Make sure that you're out there buying new stuff. Because I think this is an indication that the end of the EUAs could be on the horizon. But they do say FDA is not revoking the EUAs for decontamination and bioburden reduction systems at this time. But this is kind of the warning shot across the bow. Make sure to ramp up those supply chains. I think we all know that the use of masks is here to stay for quite a while. I hope that hospitals are no longer going to ever in the future be caught flat-footed on how many they have. Of course, it was unprecedented when COVID went through a year ago. But this is kind of FDA saying, be ready. This is now the responsibility of healthcare systems to have sufficient stock. FDA says, we believe it's out there. We're going to start pulling back some of these accommodations that we've made. And so we hope that that is something that does indeed happen. So we'll pause right there for just a second if there's any questions on this breaking news. If somebody's with a hospital system or there's more information that you want or need, we'll pause right there and just look at the Q&A to see if anybody has a question on that. So I'll pause for just a second. We do like to touch those Q&As while they're there. It's interesting, Dr. Kennedy mentioned, I have not heard of Henry Ford having a decrease in OR cases. No, nor have I heard anything from other local health systems besides UMich. Great information. Wonder why that is. And in fact, one of the questions, as we're waiting for any questions on the FDA decontamination action, is why did we not talk more about transport? I mean, it's easy to play armchair quarterback. So let's just be clear. We have so appreciated what our healthcare practitioners and hospital systems have done. It was not easy for them to go through the reduction in work that they had to do while they were sometimes waiting for cases that didn't come and sometimes being overwhelmed by cases that did come. There was no good way to plan for that. It was miserable. They did their best against amazing things. They learned a lot along the way. We will forever be grateful to them. One of the things I hope we talk about more as time goes on is in states like Michigan, where certain hospital systems were hard hit and others were not. Why was there not more talk of transport? I'd like to know that. It's an interesting thing. Maybe there's a good reason, maybe there's not. Maybe it could become part of our strategy for the future. So with a lot of humility and gratefulness, I think it would be an interesting point to talk about in the future to find out why that wasn't something that happened more. Let's see, we do have one hand raised. It's our friend Ken Spencer, and I don't know if that was on the topic of decontamination or on hospitals, but Ken, do you have a thought there?
Yeah, so actually both. So every week we get an update from emergency medicine there at Michigan, and actually I can send you that link. I think you would find the latest one very interesting on it because it sort of addresses a couple of issues here. So on the one of the issues that they face at Michigan right now is that they're seeing a really high positivity rate in waiting rooms, and so they're really trying to figure out now how do we distance people and clinical distancing as well as patient distancing, et cetera, out of there, and they're quite concerned about that. Okay, and that the reduction in the elective surgeries is not a giant reduction like it was early on. It's a small reduction, okay, and it's more of a postponement of things as opposed to saying we're not doing these things out there.
That's great information, Ken.
Yeah, and then the other one is on transport because Michigan is a destination. U of M and Michigan is a destination, if you will, for many of the hospitals farther north and things like that. Part of the problem in transport is that without the ability to isolate people, like, we have these negative pressure helmets and tents we're trying to get EUAs for, that the whole vehicle has to be decontaminated and the crew and everything, it's down. I mean, the helicopters, for instance, are out of service for a day while they decontaminate everything. So,
interesting.
So transport is a huge issue. We've run into this with DoD, of course, because the Air Force is responsible for transporting people out of theater and things, and it's a real issue. So
Ken, that's great feedback. Of course, Ken Spencer with University of Michigan's Center for Critical Care, MCIRC, and so you guys have studied this kind of thing a lot. So thank you for that insight, and also on the transport, because we know that that's something that you guys have studied a lot. I appreciate that. Great comments. All right, next up, we're going to move on from the EUAs and the decontamination. And I want to take you to this. Many of you have not heard of DICE, but I think you will more. They're doing a great job inside of FDA. They are the Division of Industry and Consumer Education. And today I want to take you through a lot of updates that DICE has made. They're getting out there and trying to educate. This is something that it's part of the reason why we find ourselves doing what we do, is because it's hard to understand what's actually going on inside the agency. It's hard to understand what your responsibility and my responsibility is towards the agency when we're trying to get a product cleared. And DICE is trying to do some of that from the inside of the agency. So first up, just to know that DICE exists, and there's their email, dice@fda.hhs.gov, a phone number with press 1 to speak to the consumer team and press 2 to speak to the industry team. If you're a consumer, press 1. If you are part of industry working on getting devices cleared, press 2. There's their hours of operation. And they maintain 2 big things. One is CDRH Learn, which has a lot of educational modules. The other is Device Advice, where they give you advice about devices and device clearance. And their mission is to educate their stakeholders with understandable and accessible science-based regulatory information about medical devices and radiation-emitting products. Of course, they're part of CDRH, or the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, so that's why that's their mission there. And they are willing to talk to you as a consumer, as an industry person. You can always get to DICE and ask a question. Now, let's talk for just a minute about the recommendations for interacting with DICE. Because one of the things that folks will do is they'll go and they'll just start asking questions willy-nilly, where they'll think that DICE is the agency that's going to clear their product. And that's not the part of the agency that's going to clear your medical device. So keep it general until you know the ropes of regulatory submissions. You can ask some general questions. And what you put in and what you get out are really related to each other. And you do get in what you, you do get out what you put in. If you don't know how FDA actually works, be a little bit careful not to put in too much, because you might not like what you get out. Remember that DICE won't give you clearance. So if you go in there saying, I'm going to convince the person on the other end of the phone that they have to clear my cool new device, you're going to come away really disappointed. So do your homework. Ask value-add questions on the basis of an existing understanding of classification, of clearance methods, of development approaches, and of how regulatory submissions work. And if you've educated yourself, DICE will be a phenomenal resource. I just want to remind you that all of the FDA education that we've done on MedTech Crossroads, we now have a page on the Into Being website where you can get to the FDA education segments. You can get there, and any of these topics that we've talked about, today's DICE talk is going to go up on there as well, with the biocompatibility stuff we're going to talk about in a few minutes. You can get there, educate yourself. These resources are free. CDRH Learn is free. Device Advice is free. Educate yourself, and then know that you can go and talk directly to the agency with your basic questions. It's a really great resource. We're proud to see FDA doing this, and we just want to get the word out there about that. To that end, DICE has made a bunch of recent publications. They're telling us about an industry basics workshop that we'll mention here in just a minute. They're talking about the STEP, I want to say STEP program, but the P stands for program, which is an alternative to the breakthrough device pathway for devices that wouldn't qualify for it. Many of you may remember we talked about this with Adrian Harris on MedTech Crossroads a few months ago. There's also this Biocompatibility Assessment Resource Center, which we're going to talk through today. There's new publications on device registration and listing, the e-copy program for submissions. the Medical Device Single Audit Program, which is a really interesting program to streamline audits for med device companies, as well as publications for COVID-19 resources. So they're getting a lot of stuff out there. It's kind of shame on us if we don't touch on it and make sure everyone's aware of it, because they're doing a great job pushing information out. Here's the first thing, the CDRH Industry Basics Workshop, April 13th, coming up really quick here. It's free. It's from 1 to 3 p.m. And depending on your interests, one of those two segments might be interesting. The one that I know will be at, because we can always use more education, is from 1 to 2 p.m. on how to use consensus standards in pre-market submissions. Boy, if I could have $1 for every time somebody came to me and said, just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it for FDA, we always have to tell them, well, FDA doesn't have a checklist of exactly what you need to do. It depends on your device. It depends on your claims. It depends on exactly where you are in the process. But if there's a place where there are a few checklists, it often comes down to consensus standards. And understanding how to use consensus standards is huge. So if you're part of a med device company, you know somebody who is, they're in development, I don't know why they wouldn't be at that workshop on the 13th at 1 to 2 p.m. Just get whatever you can out of that. It's important to stay tuned. At 2 o'clock, they've got the accreditation scheme for conformity assessment. This may be for bigger companies, ones that are interested in streamlining their quality systems and conformance assessments with the agency, as well as with international regulators. But both of those of great interest, so let folks know about that. They're also updating their information on the STEP program. I won't talk in detail about this today because we covered it with Adrienne Harris on the program a month or two ago. But the Safer Technologies program is really interesting. If you don't qualify for a breakthrough device pathway, consider looking at the STEP because it's got some really cool options there. What I do want to take a little bit of time on today is this Biocompatibility Assessment Resource Center. This is a new set of pages at DICE, and they want to unpack 10993, the biocompatibility standard. Well, as you've heard us mention, that changed in 2019. The standard changed. There were some pretty significant updates. And it's good to see FDA walking us through some of the highlights as to what they care about when it comes to conformance to this international standard. You've heard us mention many of these things before, but what's so cool is to see it all in one place at the agency. They're actually walking through a number of things that I've had to say over and over and over and over again, and they're doing it here on the Biocomp Assessment Resource Center. So let's walk through this. Throughout this, you're going to see reference to FDA's biocompatibility guidance on the use of ISO 10993-1. That's really important to get yourself into if you're going to have to do biocompatibility. And we'll talk about really who has to do Biocomp in just a second. What I love about how they've started this off is they've broken it down into 4 steps. The basics of biocompatibility, biocompatibility evaluation endpoint tables. That's really just a rehashing of things that we've known for a long time, but they've broken it down in a cool new way. They've got information on how to document a test article and how it compares to the proposed medical device. And then, I can't even believe this comes out of a government publication. What should I put in a test report? They've actually made it simple and understandable, which is really, really cool. And this isn't a crazy long set of documents and web pages. It's pretty short, and they touch on a lot of highlights. Let's look at the first one, the basics of biocompatibility. So when is biocompatibility information needed? And we've known this for a long time, but they're coming right out and saying it, which is beautiful. If a device does not have any direct or indirect tissue contact, then the FDA does not need biocompatibility information in the submission. Imagine that. If it doesn't touch somebody, you don't need to do Biocomp. Gotta love it. Well, what is the FDA going to assess or evaluate? Biocomp is focused on evaluating the potential for an unacceptable adverse biological response resulting from contact of the materials of the device with the body. Which body, though? That's the question. We often get the question, Is it only the patient? And the answer is no, it can also be the user, the medical practitioner, for example, who's using the device. So if a device is making direct or indirect contact with a patient or a user, that's when Biocomp comes into play. So I don't care whether you're working on a medical device or whether you're funding a device or whether you're advising or mentoring a device company. When does Biocomp apply? It applies when the device comes into direct or indirect contact with a patient or a practitioner. That's when Biocomp enters the equation. Well, how does the agency assess biocompatibility? This is another common hiccup where device companies get themselves into trouble. Because what do they all say? They walk through the door and the first thing they say is, well, I'm using biocompatible materials. I don't need to worry about biocompatibility. But FDA, and frankly the standard, isn't evaluating biocompatibility of the materials. It's evaluating biocompatibility of the whole device. So it's great that you're picking materials that look like they're biocompatible or have had biocompatibility testing done on them, but that's not the whole story, and it never has been. They use the term final finished form. The agency makes a clearance or approval decision for a medical device as it's supplied in its final finished form. It doesn't clear individual materials. So you got to think, in risk assessment, how do the materials change based on their processing? If I'm injection molding a device or I'm doing some kind of a chemical bath to modify the material, the manufacturing methods, any residuals from manufacturing aids, those can all affect the device biocompatibility. And it has to enter into the equation. That's why the device in its final finished form is the most important thing to be looking at. So what matters to FDA? Well, the nature of contact. With which tissues does the device or part of the device come into contact? You can probably guess that if it's touching my hand for 5 minutes, that's really different than if it's in contact with my blood for a month. That's going to change the level of concern. What kind of type of contact? Is there direct contact or indirect contact? This is a confusing term. So we actually popped the definitions up here for you. Direct contact with tissue, a device or device component that comes into physical contact with body tissue. Makes sense, right? Direct contact means it actually touches you. Indirect contact is a device or a device component through which a fluid or gas passes prior to it coming into physical contact. So administration sets, packaging materials, blood administration sets, that's indirect contact. So that syringe you're using to inject saline, that's indirect contact. But that blood pressure cuff that you wrap around an arm, that's direct contact. How long is the contact? How frequently does the contact happen? This raises the level of concern for the risk of the device. What materials is the device made from? These are all questions that the agency wants to know. And normally what we would do is we would go to a table that is contained in ISO 10993, and we'd look up, based on the answers to all those questions that we just laid out there, well, is it touching a mucosal membrane? Is it touching intact skin? Is it direct contact? Is it indirect contact? What's the duration of contact? And we'd look up in that table, and we can still do that today. I just want to tip my hat, though, to the agency for putting this endpoint table in a new form that might jog our brains and get us out of our rut a little bit. They've broken it down, first of all, by whether it's a surface device, external communicating device, or an implant device. And then, secondarily, what it's touching. And they've also broken it down by the duration of contact, limited contact, prolonged contact, or permanent contact, which is greater than 30 days. And it just, if you click on these, it gives you another way to think about the table that exists in ISO 10993. And it should be obvious that the higher concern, for permanent contact, for example, of a permanent blood contacting, you're going to have to do more testing than you are if it's just touching your skin for an hour. When it comes time to talk to the agency about your device, and it comes time to talk about how your device and the test articles you use for testing relate to your finished device, well, the agency wants to know about a few things. One is, have you documented the components, the device itself, the whole device? Have you documented processing or sterilization changes, whether from the test article to the finished device, or from your current finished device to a previously marketed device? They want to know, can you say the following about it? For example, the polymer of the test article is identical to the polymer of the medical device in its final finished form, in formulation, processing, sterilization, and geometry, and no other chemicals have been added. Or could you say something like, with the exception of, and you identify the change, FDA submission, exhibit number whatever, submitted on some date, provides scientific information to demonstrate that the change does not alter the chemical or physical properties of the medical device in its finished form. Can you say it's identically equivalent? Because guess what? If you can't, that's where the level of concern is going to pop up. So I've heard so many startups talk about how, oh, I'm using a material that's widely accepted like polycarbonate. Okay, but is that material in its current formulation, with its processing, in its geometry, with its use, and the volume that you're using it in, is it directly comparable? If it's not directly comparable to something that's already on the market, we're going to have to look at that. The looking might be in the form of a biological risk assessment, or the looking may be in the form of actual chemical testing through a biocompatibility test house. But if your component, your device, your processing, and your formulation can't be directly compared, hold on. There's some work that's got to be done. You want to know before you get to the agency with that. The next thing they talk about on this DICE page, which we're so excited about, I'm basically just telling you what FDA has said in this. If you go look at that webpage, it won't say a lot more or a lot less than this. I do encourage you to go there and review it. It's a nice in-between between 10993 itself and the FDA's guidance on 10993 and something very easily digestible. Well, and here's a question that comes up a lot. What should I put in a test report when it comes time to write a test report for Biocomp? What do you put in? Well, FDA recommends that complete test reports be provided for all tests performed unless a declaration of conformity can be appropriately provided. A declaration of conformity is basically an assurance that you have done all the things specified by a standard. But here's the catch, and I want you to listen very closely to this, because people sometimes look at standards and they say, oh, finally, maybe FDA hasn't told me all the requirements for my device, but finally, here's a standard, and if I just check all the boxes, I'll be good to go. Well, here's the bad news. FDA recognizes that standards themselves, and here they're talking specifically about 10993, do not specify either a method or test outcome. Many times, they do not specify either a method or a test outcome, and they do not necessarily include acceptance criteria. So for example, if I test a device using a specific test specified in 10993, and I come out with a number at the end, that's great. But the next question is, how do I know whether that's acceptable? Let's think about this a little bit more deeply. Any test that you can do for a device, whether it's a structural integrity test or a biocompatibility test or a sterility test or anything else, is meaningless without acceptance criteria. How safe is safe enough? How durable is durable enough? You have to have acceptance criteria. And what FDA is recognizing is that the company has to have a rationale for the test battery selected and the criteria used to determine acceptance. I want to pause on this again, because if you're listening and you are an investor in a medical device startup company, if you are an employee or a founder of a medical device startup company, if you are a mentor of a medical device startup company, If you're a manufacturer waiting for your startup to get the product done so that you can start manufacturing it and turning a profit on your end, if you're a doctor waiting for this process to be done on your cool new invention, no matter what it is, if you don't know what the term acceptance criteria is, I want to really challenge you, not just on terms of 10993, but in terms of everything that you're up against in your testing for that device. Acceptance criteria is central, and it's your company's responsibility to set the acceptance criteria. What performance is good enough? What biocompatibility is good enough? You need to enter into these determinations. What residual risk, when we talk about 14971, is good enough? You have to enter into that decision process for your company. And I want to encourage you to think about that. We're going to talk more about it. Acceptance criteria is crucial. FDA, when they digest this stuff, comes down and says acceptance criteria, acceptance criteria, acceptance criteria. And if the agency is able to get down to that level of bluntness, we better be able to too, as investors, as startups, as founders, as doctors, as mentors in the community. What are your test acceptance criteria? I want you to go out there and preach that from the rooftops. Test article preparation. Common problem we see at Into Being when a company says, we've got to get Biocomp testing done. Well, that's great. Wonderful. Let's do it. What are we going to send to the test house? Well, is it the same as the product we're intending to market? You've just heard me talk about how it has to be device in its final finished form, or something that can be argued to be close enough to its final finished form as to not change the behavior of the materials and the final device. The test report should identify the test specimen. If it's not in its final finished form, a justification should be provided. We've seen cases even recently where the test house asks for more articles than we were expecting to be able to do Biocomp testing. Got to be ready to produce those samples, to get them out there so the test house is able to do its testing and to know what the pedigree of those devices is. You know what the term pedigree means? It means not just somewhere in an email I have a definition of what our device is, but I can really go back and I can document this is what went into that device. Here was the design, here was the versioning of it, here was the materials, here was the lot numbers of that. That's what it means to identify the test specimen as you go in. And as you can see, that's not just a problem of the test house. That's a problem for the startup that's doing its development. That's something that you have to have access to when you go to Biocomp. Test parameters and acceptance criteria, also from FDA. The test report should identify the test parameters and acceptance criteria applied. If the test method is not in accordance with a published guidance document or FDA recognized standards that includes defined acceptance criteria, a rationale for the acceptance criteria should be provided. Are we getting the message yet? FDA is coming out, and when they want to talk to industry, what they're saying is, we're not seeing enough acceptance criteria defined. We're not seeing enough rationale. We're seeing a blind adherence to standards without the company actually going out and saying, what we did here meets what we think we needed to do. So if there's one message that DICE is actually putting out there really strongly, it's this idea of being ready with your acceptance criteria, with an understanding of your test methodologies. And this applies to 10993 for Biocomp, but it actually applies to all the testing that you're going to do as a part of verification and validation for your medical device. Well, you thought we were done, but we're actually not quite done. Here's one more, analysis of results. Again, if I could have $1 for every time a company forgot to analyze and conclude their results, only to have the FDA say, well, that's not enough. I'd be a rich man. The test report should provide a summary of the test results and include tables of each data point. If includes statistical analyses, if applicable. We've received many responses to 510Ks, which we didn't submit, and they come back and the agency is saying, you submitted test reports, but you didn't tell us what you think those mean. And this is absolutely critical, as well as coming to a conclusion about what those test reports mean. What did you conclude? Did you conclude that it was biocompatible to a level acceptable for your product? It's got to be in the final product that you submit to the agency. So there's your crash course on a number of things that DICE has been pushing out. I'll go back here really quickly to the total list of recent DICE publications that they've made. Industry Basics Workshop coming up on April 13th. Of course, the Safer Technologies program, which if you're a startup, I want you to look at, as well as the Breakthrough Device Pathway. This Biocompatibility Assessment Resource Center. If you have anything to do with a product touching anybody, go look at the Biocompatibility Assessment Resource Center under DICE, under CDRH, and then a bunch of other information coming out from DICE on these other topics. So a lot of great stuff from them. I want to switch over and see if we have any questions from the audience on this cool stuff from DICE. And what I will do is I'll wait a minute for those in case there's any questions. So we'll give folks a minute for that. Other than that, what we're going to do is we're going to go to any Q&A or any announcements that anybody wants to make. We are happy to take those here. We've told you about some upcoming events that are near term for folks in our community. But if there's anything else that you want to let the community know about, we would love to use this opportunity to tell folks about that. So we'll wait just a minute more for that. And not seeing any at the moment. I want to thank you all for being here for MedTech Crossroads on April 9th. We'll see you next week and hope you have a great, beautiful spring. It's gorgeous out there. Go out and enjoy it. Talk soon. Bye-bye.